My name's Angelo, and welcome to We Want Picks. This is the only channel dedicated to UFC picks and DraftKings lineups run by professional fighters and MMA insiders. Every week, I join Nick Newell, professional fighter, professional model, and ESPN Top 10 guest, along with Dan Kramer, UFC fighter, Bellator fighter, Ultimate Fighter alumni, and Jacob Lyons, a skinny kid from Indiana. And we break down every single fight, the betting odds, the DraftKings picks, and we set you up for success. This week, we're breaking down the Blaydes versus Lewis fight night. First up on the Blaydes versus Lewis fight card, we have Rafael Alves versus Pat Sabatini. We have two relative newcomers to the UFC with a very interesting fight. It's a mismatch in DraftKings. It's a mismatch in the betting odds, but I actually think it'll be much closer considering Pat Sabatini took this fight on 1 week's notice. Nick, why don't you go ahead, let us know who you think's going to win this fight, how you think this fight's going to go.
If you look at Alves' record, you can see those 9 losses. Those 9 losses stand out to me, but they were very early in his career. He's since turned a corner and fought really, really good people and picked up a lot of wins. So I can see as why he's the favorite. But if you look at Sabatini, he's a hammer. He runs people into the ground. He's got very good wrestling. And just all around, he's a winner and a very competitive fighter wherever the fight goes. I don't think that these lines make sense. I think that Sabatini actually has a better chance than people think, especially considering his wrestling. But if I was going to pick a favorite, I would obviously pick Alves. Now, if you bet a lot and you don't really have a lot of room in your lineup and you want to take the risk, I do not think Sabatini is a bad risk, but I'm going to stay away from both this week.
Yeah, I think that's solid, and it's interesting because I do agree. I think Pat Sabatini has the better chance of winning. I think his wrestling certainly helps him there. He did take it on very short notice, only a week or so. The big question mark for me for Pat is he had a pretty gruesome injury about a year or so ago. He won since then, but I just don't know, sort of what that does to your psyche, and he's taking this on short notice. So there's a lot of questions sort of up in the air, but I think the odds are way off, but it'll definitely be competitive. I don't know, Dan, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think an injury a year ago, as bad as that was, affects him?
No, yeah, I agree. I would love to see what the odds would look like if this fight were not Sabatini taking on a week's notice. I always say nowadays, like, short notice is a big question mark because guys, you got to figure they're planning to be ready for that call. So I do think in that sense he could be a good value pick at 7,300. I'm probably not going to touch this one right now just because I like Sabatini. I think he does some tricky things, but Alves is good as well. He's an athlete. But him taking it on 1 week's notice, coming off an injury, I'm not going to touch it at this point. I got some other people in mind that I'd rather go after.
So, and Nick, I forgot to ask you, but so Nick, who do you think wins? And then Dan, who do you think actually wins, regardless of DraftKings?
I'm going with Alves would be the favorite because he's had more time to prepare. Okay. But I think Sabatini is a hammer, and I don't know what kind of shape he's in. I don't know how he's gonna show up, and he could get it done. So I'm just not gonna touch it because there's too many variables for me.
Gotcha. And then Dan, what's your pick? Same pick?
Yeah, I don't like me. Yeah, you forced us into these official picks. All right, I'll go with Alves because the other guy's taking on a week's notice. But yeah, if he's in great shape, I think that fight could be very different. Sabatini's really good, tricky in the clinch. But Alves is a really good athlete, and if he's in shape, that's going to be a problem over the course of a 3-round fight. So I'll go with Alves for the pick.
So Jacob, we're the two of them are going with Alves, less because of his just raw ability and more. He is very talented, but
I will say though too that if Sabatini, I'm just as I'm rethinking some of Alves' fights, he doesn't have the best cardio to begin with. So it may be kind of a break even with Sabatini taking it short notice. So I don't know. My mind is kind of a coin flip only because of the short notice. So I guess for now, official pick is Alves.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a much closer fight than these odds are. And so, Jacob, so 2 reluctant Alves picks, mostly because of a short notice Sabatini. What are your thoughts? You've fallen into that camp?
Yeah, and actually, Nick kind of undercut my big line I had planned out here. He said that Alves was kind of making a turn in his career. I was going to say that he was making the turn of his career lately because his nickname is The Turn. So thanks, Nick, for undercutting me on that. The first joke of the night just lands.
That's high quality stuff.
Yeah. So, but when I watch these fighters, what I see the most is I watched an interview, first of all, of Sabatini, and there's something different when champions talk. You can just tell the way they talk, the confidence. He's got that championship mentality. So when you say short notice fight, I don't think it's going to affect him at all. I think he has mental preparation to work through that. When I look at Alves, I see someone that's comfortable on his back, too comfortable. When he gets there, I don't see him getting up. And I think Sabatini is a better wrestler, and I think he's better at jiu-jitsu. Alves has 6 submission losses. And if you look at Sabatini's record, I believe of his 13 wins, he has 9 submission wins. So I think he gets on top. I think he bulldogs Alves, and I think he wins the fight.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm in that camp as well. I think Sabatini does win the fight. I'm picking him as an underdog. It's not the most confident pick I've ever had in my entire life, but I do think I think he can do it. His grappling is very strong, and I believe in the underdog this year. We have seen ridiculous underdog after ridiculous underdog get it done. He took it on short notice, but he is that kind of guy, and I have to assume he's prepared. He might not be 6-week training camp prepared, but I have to assume he's prepared, and for that reason, I'm picking him. So we are split here. We're 2-2. Everybody likes Sabatini. Everybody thinks Sabatini can win, but the 2 pro fighters are just going to side with Rafael Alves because of the full training camp.
One thing I will say is I'm going to do a little bit more research throughout the week just to see what Sabatini's been doing training-wise over the last 6 weeks. And if it looks like he's been like calling for a UFC fight over the last 2 months, I haven't looked that far yet. But if I see that and know that he's in shape, I will consider switching my pick and playing him in DraftKings, because if he comes in shape, I think he would win this fight. So that's the big question mark at this point.
So Dan's going to go creep some social media and let us know.
Sabatini, I'm going to be friend requesting you on Twitter. Let me know what you're doing for workouts.
Friend request on Twitter. That's funny.
Yeah, that's how old Dan is.
Sorry. Yeah, right.
Man, Dan.
You can tell how active I am. So I'll poke him, right? Do people still do that?
Jesus.
Check your inbox.
Next up on the UFC Fight Night, Blaydes versus Lewis, we have another set of heavyweights with Sergey Spivak versus Jared Vanderaa. There's 2 A's at the end, and I have no idea how to pronounce that. So this is another interesting matchup. We have a great wrestler versus a great Sambo guy. Dan, in the wrestling versus Sambo matchup here, what direction are you going with Jared being the wrestler and Sergey being the Sambo champion?
So this is an interesting one. I am not sure that I'm going to touch it in DraftKings. I may once I play with my final few pieces here. But I will say I think these odds are off. I'm probably going to make a bet on this, and I think I'm going to take I think you spelled his name wrong there. I think it's Vanderaa, but we'll call him Vanderaa for today. Anyways, I think I'm going to take I think Vanderaa has a very decent chance at winning this. So I watched tape on Spivak. He's a smaller heavyweight. He's like 234, maybe 240, but he's not ripped. Decent striking. He's quick for a heavyweight. But in his fight against Marcin Tybura, he got taken down and just stayed on his back. And he was happy to stay there. He closed his guard. He really didn't look like he knew what to do off his back. He also got out-muscled in the clinch by Tybura, who's a legit size heavyweight. He went for a couple throws against Tybura, ended up on bottom. So I think size is going to be a factor. From what I see, Vanderaa looks to be a legit big heavyweight who cuts down to 265. That was one fight, and when I saw that fight, I was like, man, Vanderaa is going to take this guy down and maul him. But then I saw some other fights where Spivak looked awesome, but those were against strikers for the most part. Those were against guys that stylistically matched up well with him. But I will say he's improved each fight. So I think Vanderaa is going to be the much bigger, much more physical, stronger fighter. And I think if he can figure out a way to get it up against the cage, get a takedown, I think Spivak's going to have a problem on his back unless he's improved significantly from 2 fights ago. So I'm going to go with the underdog Vanderaa. And I may put him in my DraftKings. The only thing I'm concerned about in DraftKings is I think he could win an ugly, slow-paced fight that doesn't add up to a lot of points. I just got to figure out if $7,100 is worth that. So Vanderaa is my pick for the upset.
I mean, that's solid. I always tend to favor wrestlers when it's a wrestler versus a different grappling art, whether it's wrestling versus judo, and in this case, wrestling versus sambo. For those of you who may not know what sambo is, sambo is like a combination of judo and jiu-jitsu where it's upper body and it's throws, but there also are some submissions on the ground, not jiu-jitsu level scramble type submissions, but mostly arm locks and things of that nature. So, it's definitely a combat sport, and it's an interesting one. And it has found some success in MMA. I think Spivak's a better fighter. I don't necessarily know he's going to win this fight, but I'll do my pick in a minute. Jacob, first, apologize for the graphics. Jacob does our graphics. Any spelling errors are on him. So apologize for the graphic first, and then let me know who you think's going to win this fight.
Yeah, let me first apologize on behalf of my editor, who I send them into for double checking. I do the best I can. I'm putting these as best I can, and my editor did not catch that. So I do apologize on his behalf. But yeah, when I look at this fight, I'm glad. It seems like every week with fights like these, I'm like, I feel like I'm going to see it the other way of the other person. And then Dan is always on my side, and we're always 1-2. So I just feel smarter every single week because Dan nailed it. Jared is an improving fighter. And when I see with him, you guys mentioned the wrestling, I see incredible kicks. He's got crazy kicks. And if you watch, I watched the Spivak, Sergey. When I watched the Sergey fight, he actually got knocked down by a leg kick. So he doesn't like those at all. He also kind of shelled up against Walt Harris. You mentioned him on his back. It seemed like he kind of gave up. When he got hit by Walt Harris, he just shelled up and just acted like he just wanted no part of that fight. So I actually have Sergey winning this fight, but I think Dan nailed it. Jared is a more than a live underdog, and I think he can definitely win this fight. But I think Sergey just kind of is a little bit better talent-wise.
One other thing I'll add too on Vanderaa is it looks like he's got a hell of a chin too. He was getting bombed on. What fight was it?
Yeah, I have written in my notes, very tough.
Yeah, he was getting bombed on.
LFA.
Yeah, he was getting bombed on a couple fights, and he took him. So even if Spivak gets out to the early striking match, winning that, I think Vanderaa, all he needs is one takedown. And if Spivak hasn't improved since that Tybura fight, he's going to have a tough time on bottom.
Well, and Sambo's not a bottom mixed martial art. It's not a bottom martial art at all. It's throws and submissions from top. It's not really, it's not jiu-jitsu where you're throwing up arm bars, triangles, and things like that from the bottom. So, Nick, you're familiar with Vanderaa. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I fought on the same card as Vanderaa. I met him before. Very nice guy. He's kind of got that like old school slugger, I'm a fighter type mentality. He's not a martial artist. He's a fighter. There's a difference between that. This guy, I think he gives me those vibes. Like this is a guy that would be fighting in the back of a bar if there wasn't MMA around for him to make a living. So, in this, I look at that and I'm like, okay, well, anytime you get that, you get a big physical guy, he could win by knockout. But then I look at Spivak's record, okay? And you look at who he's fought and who he's beat. And you look at Tybura. So I don't even count that fight. I mean, obviously what happens, you can't take Tybura, who's a top 10 heavyweight, and compare it to someone that's making their UFC debut. I mean, Tybura's beaten a who's who of fighters, and it's just a different animal and a different level of veteranship when it comes to that. But I can look at the other people. Okay, so Walt Harris knocked him out. Also, Walt Harris is a more composed striker. He's more pinpoint. He's a more accurate guy. His technique is better for that. And then I look at the two most important people on Spivak's record for this fight. One, Carlos Felipe. Carlos Felipe moves forward, throws bombs, boxes, has been winning lately, and Spivak beat him. The other person is Taitu Ivasa. And Taitu Ivasa actually reminds me a little bit of Vanderaa. Maybe not necessarily as good of a wrestler, but striking style very similar. And, you know, he beat Tuivasa pretty easy. And Vandeera's been submitted before. So I'm going to go with Spivak on this. I don't think he's a bad person to put in your DraftKings lineup, but I have my picks. I have my lineup for a reason. I took the ones that I thought were the safest, and he is not in it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nick. I think I do like Jared Vanderaa in this fight. I think he can win this fight. I mentioned earlier, I always favor wrestlers over other grappling arts because, you know, the takedowns are more versatile. Where Sambo, it's very close to judo where, you know, you got to be working up top to then work your way to the mat. So I'm favoring him for that regard. I think Jared, as far as the grappling aspect is concerned, is probably a little above. But I do think Spivak wins this fight. I think he's just a little more well-rounded everywhere. I think he's, although their records are similar and he has fewer fights, he actually feels like the more polished, more established, more of a veteran type fighter. So I think Spivak wins this. It would not surprise me if Jared, you know, goes out there, takes him down, beats on him. But I do think Spivak wins this fight.
Well, I'm on an island then, right? I'm the only one with Vanderaa.
I was close.
You're the only
Harry Huffsucker was his big win, his last big win.
All right. I like it.
I like saying that name. There's nothing else to it. I just wanted to say the name.
I have here in my notes, I didn't mention it before, but he's out there at Team Quest training with a 290-pound collegiate wrestler. So
and I didn't mention this before either, that Sergey's nickname is the polar bear. Great name.
Well, he stole that from Garland.
I wonder why. He had a polar bear with a cage with that too.
Next up on UFC Fight Night, Blaydes versus Lewis, we have Aiemann Zahabi versus Drako Rodriguez. And Zahabi, you are right, that is Firas Zahabi's brother. So George St. Pierre's very famous coach, this is his brother. So interesting matchup. This is another one where the fight will be exciting and the odds are wrong, at least in my opinion. So I don't think Rodriguez is a 2-1 favorite. I think he's a very good fighter. He's wild and he's fighting Zahabi, who's much more technical. Dan, we had this conversation a few weeks ago about a different fight where you mentioned a wild fighter can be tricky. So what do you think happens here?
I agree with you. I don't think the odds in the DraftKings price are reflective of how this fight will go down. I watched some tape on Zahabi. First of all, he's the younger brother of the TriStar head coach, Firas Zahabi. He lost his last two, but hasn't fought since May of 2019. So I don't know. You got to assume he's at TriStar, his brother's head coach. He's training and improving. Could be wrong on that, but you know, I would think he's improving. He did look a little flat-footed in his striking, especially for a division where guys move like crazy. He's got a good jab, good uppercut. He's a black belt in BJJ. Fought competitive against a tough Ricardo Ramos. He was a bit outclassed and eventually got KO'd, but he looked tough. He got hit with that spinning elbow that broke his jaw. I don't know if you guys saw that video, but pretty brutal. He lost the decision to Vince Morales. Same thing, not a ton of footwork, kind of plods a bit. looks to like to strike, but will shoot a takedown occasionally. So he seems good. He's well-rounded. I just think he hasn't shown that breakout performance. And depending on what he's been doing the past couple of years, we could get that, or we could get more of what we've seen. As far as Rodriguez goes, he's 24 years old. His last fight was on Dana White Contender Series, the end of 2020 against Mana Martinez. He looks like a very good striker, very comfortable. He got a takedown. He got threatened with an armbar and ended up on the bottom. He landed a triangle, so he scrambled pretty well. He's got some submission awareness. But what I will say is all his previous fights were to guys with losing records, except for Tony Gravely, who he lost to in the 5th round via TKO in 2018. So Zahabi's the underdog. I would not be surprised if he shows up much improved after the layoff, assuming he's training at TriStar and getting better. I feel like he might be a live underdog on this one, but kind of no actual proof to show it. I just feel like the odds are wrong and this guy is going to be better than what we're seeing on paper. So we'll see. Could be wrong. You're going to make me make a pick, Angelo. Very low confidence, but for the sake of picking an upset, I'll go with Zahabi.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. This is definitely a tricky one to pick. I don't know what money I would throw at this, and I think maybe you throw Zahabi in a lineup if you have the room, or if you need the room. But Nick, what are your thoughts on this? And quick reminder, Zahabi, he's had a long layoff, but he hasn't won a fight in 4 years. So is that a factor? What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, Zahabi does that step forward hook really well. I remember the fight he won. I remember watching. I'm like, oh, he's really good at this. He keeps going to the well with it. But he's not a very dynamic fighter. I would even say an athletic fighter. He's not that powerful, like takedown artist type guy. He's more of a guy that strikes, and if he ends up on top, he's going to do his jiu-jitsu. And even though he's shot before, I wouldn't say he's like a very strong wrestler. Then you look at Drako Rodriguez, who's fought a lot of people with losing records, beat a winning record guy on Contender Series, and I think won other ones, and then lost to Tony Gravely, who's a hammer of a wrestler, who's a TKO'd a lot of people in the regional scene, was a CES champion, and is an all-around beast. What this comes down to is I think Zahabi is a martial artist, but he's not super athletic or anything like that. And Drako Rodriguez is a dog, and he's got that dog in him, and he's gonna pull off the win. How confident I am in that, I don't know, but I'm going with Drako Rodriguez, and I'm not touching this fight.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the CES thing. So CES, for anybody who doesn't know, local promotion in the Northeast, but they have some awesome talent. Nick, you fought there, but others and friends of ours have fought there, but they managed to get some really good talent, breakout talent in the entire Northeast for the most part. And I think Draco's very good. I think he's genuinely a very good fighter. Like you said, we talked earlier, the difference between a mixed martial artist and a fighter. I think Draco's more of a fighter, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, especially in this matchup when he is fighting. Zahabi, it's interesting because you mentioned he's not super athletic, and I agree with that, and that's not necessarily a knock. Some people are naturally gifted, and others have to work a little harder for it. But I think it's sort of a weird situation where his brother is like this world-famous coach. He's interested in fighting. He's around it, and he just sort of started fighting, and maybe it's not necessarily, he has to work pretty hard to do well at it. So it's an interesting matchup. I will give my pick. I'm going to take Rodriguez. I think the odds are wrong, though. I don't think he's a 2-1 favorite, but I think he does win this fight. I think Zahabi is very, regimented. Okay, I'm standing. It's time to strike. We're on the ground. It's time to do jiu-jitsu. And I don't think he has like those fighter instincts and that natural ability. But Jacob, why don't you go ahead and make a pick here? So we've got 1 for Zahabi, 2 for Rodriguez.
Yeah. So the first thing I saw about Zahabi was not even about him. It was about the level of competition he's been facing. So let me just quickly run through here. His 2 wins ago, a guy is 3-2 here. Then we go to 3 wins ago, guy's 3-1. So he's not bad. That was his first loss. Then you go to 4 wins ago, the guy's 7-12. Then you go a little bit deeper. Guys 0-3. So the level of competition I see, guys 4-9. When I watched Zahabi, I saw a fighter that looked like he was just kind of stuck in the mud, got to take a line from Connor. So, and the level of competition on top of that just kind of pad the record. I see Drako in boxing matches. I also see he's got a bunch of submission wins on top of it. I think he's a better fighter. I think Drako takes this easily. I don't think Zahabi's. I think Dan alluded to it. That's why he took the year off, to try and get better, because they realized once they got to the UFC that he just wasn't as good as he thought he was. So Drako wins this one easy. I don't have him in my lineup, but he wins this easy. Yeah,
that's an interesting taking a year off to get better. That's an interesting thought there. So it's 3-1. Three of us are going Rodriguez with Dan, the lone survivor, for Zahabi. We'll see how that plays out. All of us agree these odds aren't quite what they should be. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Blaydes versus Lewis. We have a featherweight clash between Chaz Skelly and Jamall Emmers. Another interesting matchup, another close fight, but not according to the odds. Nick, what are your thoughts on this fight?
What is up with these odds? Chaz Skelly has been in the UFC forever and beat a ton of really good people and had close fights with good fighters. And Emmers is new, and he had a win over a guy that's just pretty good fighter. Obviously, everyone that makes the UFC is pretty good, but nothing special. And then he fought Giga Kasagi, who's been hot, but Giga is a striker, and Jamall was able to wrestle with him. But he's not a wrestler on Skelly's level. And I think Skelly mucks him and wins this fight. And based on these odds and based on the cost of this, I put Skelly in my lineup because I have some big favorites that I want to put in my lineup. And I need some underdogs. And I'm like, this one makes sense because he's going to win.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, short, simple, to the point, and I completely agree. The odds, another fight where the odds are crazy, and this is a crazy year where we've seen underdogs just continue to win, and the odds makers haven't caught on to that, and I don't know why, but I completely agree. Jacob, you're nodding furiously. What are your thoughts here?
We've hit it early, boys. This is the lock of the week. My boy Chaz, and it's got to be. Look, I mean, when you look at these two guys, who do you think's going to win this fight? I mean, I'm sorry, Chaz, but Emmers, I mean, look at that man. What would he call it? What did we call it earlier? The unbelievable man meat, I think I said. But when you break it down.
Don't ever use that one again. Keep that. Don't take that out. But if you want to make that your thing, go for it.
Did you just call Chaz Skelly unbelievable man meat?
Yeah. Chaz Skelly, unbelievable man meat. Look at those shoulders, man. Oh, my God.
Oh, Lord.
Something to strive for. But anyway, yeah, so looks can be definitely deceiving on Chaz. The one thing that actually worries me in this fight, and Emmers is no slouch. He beat Sandhagen, who we just saw knock out Frankie Edgar. He'll eat shots, and I think that's going to work at a disadvantage for Chaz because Chaz is a decent striker. He's an unbelievable wrestler, but he's a decent striker. And I think when he sees himself landing shots on Emmers, it can kind of draw him out into that battle. So if he uses his grappling, he's going to dominate the fight and he's going to win. If he tries to strike, he could struggle, but that guy, he puts his hands low and he'll eat shots. And Emmers said he's going to finish him in the second round. I think that's fake confidence. I think he knows what he's in for. So I'm picking Chaz Skelly. I'm putting him in my lineup. Lock of the week. Write it down 3 weeks in a row.
Dan, you buying into the hype train that Jacob just put on the rails for you?
I'm not going to say it's lock of the week, but yeah, I'm with Chaz Skelly on this one. It's funny. So I watched his first fight and I saw him come out and I was like, man, this guy looks like he cannot strike at all. He looks awkward, but I'll tell you what, every fight I've watched since then, he gets better striking and he is a freaking zombie. He's a good wrestler. He wins all these fights against guys who he looks like he's going to get destroyed just in terms of athleticism. And he's tough as hell. I mean, he's gotten the back of so many guys and almost rear naked choked, I think, every single person he's ever fought. He's tough. He can take a shot. He gets, he's just a scrapper. It could be a wild fight, and he always figures out a way to end up in a good position.
God, his nickname is the Scrapper. Way to go, Dan.
I didn't even know that. Look at that. I didn't even know that.
You nailed it.
Well, I understand why that's his nickname now for sure. I will say too, another reason why I'm going to take him is because he definitely looks like he's improving each fight. He only has 3 losses. One of them is to Mirsad Bektik, who is extremely good. I trained with him for a lot of years. That kid is talented as can be. He's lost some fights that I don't think he should have lost. For whatever the reason is, he hasn't quite been able to put it together. But when I tell you that kid was a prospect, he was like unbelievably good in the gym. So, and to lose to him by a majority decision, like, that's crazy to be able to compete at that level. Jamall Emmers, though, is good as well. He's won 5 of his last 6. He lost a split decision to Chikadze, which, is a tough fight stylistically for a striker. He's very athletic, light on his feet, mixes it up, good knees in the clinch. He's a good striker. I keep hearing that he has underrated wrestling, apparently. So when I hear that, that means it's either true and he really does, or somebody's, justifying that he can wrestle because the word is that he can't. I don't know. We'll find out, I guess. But I have a feeling this is going to be a fight where Emmers is the better athlete and the better striker. But Skelly is just a lot better than he looks, a lot tougher. Gonna make it ugly, and the dude just, like I said, he's a zombie. So I think he's gonna find a way to make this an ugly fight, get some takedowns, get his back, maybe get a rear naked choke, or just win an all-out scrap, since he is the scrapper. So I'm taking Skelly. I'm putting especially at $7,400. We didn't even talk about that. What a value! I think he's game for a 3-round fight, no matter how it goes. So he's in my lineup.
My favorite line ever is when you have to tell someone you're good at something, that means you're not good at it. So when people are trying to come out and say Emmers is a good wrestler, that means he hasn't shown enough to prove it. So
right. That's exactly what I meant to say. That was exactly what I was trying to get to before, Jacob. If they have to call underrated wrestler, it means that.
Great minds, Dan. What do we say? 1 and 2 every week. Great minds. I know.
The 1-2 punch right there.
Yeah. All right. Well, putting that aside, I agree. 4 up, 4 down. We're all going Chaz Skelly. We all think he's a very live underdog. It's just his general toughness and his wrestling that'll put this over the edge. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Blaydes versus Lewis. We have Shana Dobson versus Casey O'Neill. This is a weird one. I'm not going to lie. This is a very weird fight. This is a tough fight to pick. It's, if you zoom out, this is sort of a regional fight. Let's try to build up O'Neill. Let's try to turn her into somebody. I don't know if it necessarily belongs on a decent fight night card, but they are both very talented. They both could win this fight. Shana Dobson is coming off what might have been the upset of the century. The odds were ridiculous in her last fight, and she won that fight just by toughness and outlasting and just continuing to march forward. And Casey O'Neill is an up-and-comer, is a prospect that they're trying to push, and that's why this matchup exists. So, Nick, what are your thoughts on this fight? Do you think the UFC is sort of setting Casey up to win, and that's what this matchup is, or what do you think's going on here?
I remember watching Maria Agapova fight and absolutely destroy Hannah Cifers, and I was like, wow, this is a mean woman. And afterwards, she called out Shana Dobson, which I thought was kind of like a weak thing to do, because at the time, Shana Dobson had a 3-4 record and probably shouldn't even been in the UFC, had like 3 straight losses. And her record's actually 4-4 now. But she won that fight. She was a huge underdog, like one of the biggest ones of the year, and won that fight and came back. So you can't count her out. But then she has 3 straight losses to women that have lost a ton of fights in the UFC, not really killers. So it's really hard to get a range on that, to kind of figure out like how's she going to show up, how good is she going to be. And O'Neill hasn't really fought anyone that's proven. She has a better record, but she hasn't fought the level of competition that Dobson's fought. But she's a winner, and I'm going to go I'm going to take her for the win, because the momentum that she has going, I think she'll keep it going, and I believe that she will win this fight. But I am also not taking her because I just don't know enough about her. in terms of versus the level of competition that Dobson has fought. I know she's good, but it's all about who you fight, and there's too many unknowns, so I'm not touching it.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, essentially. I mean, Shana Dobson's a fighter, and she's got grit, and she's tough because she got beat on, survived the round, came back, and then won that fight. And it was very, very, very lopsided fight, or fight odds that, she was definitely supposed to lose and came back and won. It's tricky, though, because like you said, Casey O'Neill doesn't have a lot of fights. There's not enough fights to really look at and make a true assessment. But she does come from, it's literally in her blood. Her dad was a professional kickboxer. It's literally in her blood to be doing this. She's training. She takes it very seriously. Her father owns a promotion that she's fought in. So I think she should win. But this is – I'm not going to touch it in DraftKings, and I'm not going to touch it with real money. And if we look at the DraftKings very quickly before I give it to you, Dan, $8,500, that is a lot of money. That should be essentially a lock. And then with Dobson – she's supposed to be this giant underdog, with $7,700 is not giant underdog. $7,700 is small underdog. So I'm not touching it. I think it's all these numbers are a disaster. So I'm not touching it. But Dan, what are your thoughts here? And do you agree?
Overall, I agree. I think there's a lot of hype with Casey O'Neill. But from the fights I saw, they were pretty one-sided, with kind of really her getting her way from beginning to end. And Angelo, I thought I had a little secret intel, but you mentioned it. You positioned it a different way than I'm going to position it. But the league that she fought in, that her dad runs, to me, he's the matchmaker. You think he's going to set her up with any fights that aren't going to make her look good? I don't know if that's the case, but I looked at most of her opponents' records, and they were either 0-0 at the time, and the people that she fought with more fights than that or had decent win streaks, their opponents mostly had no fights. So I'm not saying she's not good. I'm just saying the level of competition, we'll find out if she's good on Saturday night. So, and I believe it's Shana Dobson, but Shana Dobson looked really tough in her last fight against Agapova, who was very good. She just gassed really hard when she couldn't get the finish. But I'll say Dobson looked tough even in that first round when she was taking some shots. And I think the big thing is I believe right before that fight, she moved her training camp to Elevation Fight Team. So I think she probably improved a lot, in that training camp. I think she's going to continue to improve. She's only 31 or 32 years old. So I think we're going to see a much better Shana Dobson. And I think it's going to be a close fight, but I think she's live for an upset here. I probably am going to put her in my DraftKings lineup right now at $7,700. I wish she was a little cheaper. But right now, I feel pretty good about her being very competitive and potentially winning this fight.
All right, so Dan going with the underdog. 2 for the favorite, 1 with the underdog. Jacob, what are your thoughts here?
Great minds. What am I saying? Great minds think alike. The champs are back at it again. And Dan nailed it. The team elevation switch makes all the difference. She's around unbelievable fighters every day that she's training. And that just changed her career. I do agree with Dan, though. I wish she was cheaper. I have it in my notes here. I wish she was like a $7,300 fighter. And at 3-4, 4-4, against an undefeated fighter, that's what she probably should have been. That's how much respect that DraftKings and even odds makers, when you look at it, have in Dobson to win this fight. Because I think the UFC messed this one up big time. I think they want O'Neill to succeed. They thought, we'll give her Shana Dobson. She looks the part. She's very clean fighter, in and out. And I don't think she's ready for what Shana Dobson's about to do to her. She doesn't want a dirty fight, and Shana Dobson's going to get in her face, and she's not going to like it. And Dan nailed it again. I think Nick mentioned it as well. The level of competition that she has faced, even if Dobson is a 4-4 fighter, she's a different 4-4 fighter now. So I don't have Shana Dobson in my lineup. I wish she was cheaper, and I would, but I have her winning the fight.
Okay, yeah. So we're split on this. I don't think you sounded the most confident. Honestly, the rest of us think it's 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 sort of a pretty close fight because we have a relative unknown versus sort of a gritty 500 fighter.
I just looked up the odds, by the way, because I can track the odds of where they were and where they ended up. At one point, she was plus 185, and that's been bet down probably by sharp money all the way to plus 125. So that means a lot of people are seeing it that way and pulling that line down. So we'll see. I would have loved that bet all day at plus 185, though. That's for sure.
Yeah, she's definitely not a 2-1 underdog. It's definitely it's a closer fight than we imagine. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Blaydes versus Lewis. We have Nate Landwehr versus John Erosa. This is a very close fight. The odds makers got this one correct. DraftKings got this one correct. It's a close fight, and they see it that way, unlike some of the other ones we've seen on this card. I'm just going to go right to you, Nick. What are your thoughts on this fight? How do you see it going, and do you think it's as close as the odds makers think?
I do. I think that, very much so that Julian Erosa could, because you read John Erosa.
These names and spellings tonight are just all over. John Erosa.
What a disaster. I got to redo that.
Damn it, John.
Just leave it.
Just leave it. It's funny. Who cares? Leave all this.
As fast as I could.
Just leave it. It's funny. Okay, so we all know that his name's not John Erosa. His name is Julian Erosa.
Julian Erosa.
You're not editing this out.
Real professional gig we got going here, guys. Angelo, leave all this in. Come on. It's for the fans. They enjoy this banter.
Legitimately.
The millions and millions of the We Want Picks fans.
Erosa is an entertaining fighter. When Erosa fights, I want to watch it. I remember his underdog run on the Ultimate Fighter. He was originally on the Ultimate Fighter, and he fought, and I believe he beat a guy that was around Massachusetts for a while that was really good, Abner Laveris, on that show. And he was supposed to lose that fight, and he won, and he beat someone else, and then he lost to Artem, who actually went on a really good tear on that show as well. But he comes back, he loses a couple fights. He beats Jamall Emmers on the Contender Series, loses a couple fights in the UFC, and comes in basically to lose to Woodson, and ends up getting it done, choking him out. I've drilled with Erosa, top level guy, very talented, very technical. Not a very solid guy, actually really thin and, not very stocky. And then we go to Nate Landwehr, who, Angelo, I'm sure you're actually very familiar with yourself going down the line. If you don't remember, he was in the XFC. So I was fighting in the XFC, and Nate the Train, baby, Landwehr. If you look it up on Google, after his first win, he has one of the most wildest interviews I've ever seen in my entire life. East Tennessee, West Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, any Tennessee, woo! And he runs and takes his shirt off, and he's running away, and like the reporters like chasing him. I love it. Anyway, nothing to do with the fights, but look at who he's fought. So he got knocked out by Herbert Burns with like a crazy bomb knee, and I'm not saying that it wasn't a legitimate win. I'm very sure it was. Anytime you do something like that. But he beat Darren Elkins, who's like a division staple, who's been in the UFC forever, and is not an easy win. And that was he bloodied him up pretty good. And then you look at all these people: Victor Kolsenik, Andrei, all these Kazmat, all these crazy Russians with these crazy wins that have fought other crazy Russians, and they're all tough, and they're all guys that nobody would want to fight. Nate Landwehr does not care. He wants to fight anyone, anytime, anywhere. He's a Southern boy. He's a fighter. He cornered someone that I fought one time, and he looked me dead in the eyes, and I'm like, I'm going to have to fight this guy too. I was like warming up. I was like, man, I'm going to fight his corner after the fight too. I was like, why is the guy looking at me like that? I think that these odds are pretty good because Erosa could win. He's all heart. He's great technique, but Landwehr is a dog. Unfortunately, I love Erosa. Landwehr is my pick, and I'm putting him in my lineup.
Wow. Well, first of all, that's why you come and watch these breakdowns, for that literal inside information. So Nick over here trained with Erosa, has had run-ins with Landwehr.
Erosa. I don't like the way Landwehr looked at me in the corner. It still bugs me. Like these crazy eyes. I'm like, what is this guy doing? Like, why is he looking at me like that? And afterwards, he like wouldn't talk to me. I'm like, man, this guy's kind of crazy. I'm rooting for Erosa, but I'm going with Landwehr.
Yeah, and I did not remember him until you referenced the XFC. So Nick's a fighter, Dan's a fighter, I'm a manager. I managed Nick in the XFC and a few other fighters in the XFC as well. And now I absolutely remember him from the XFC. And those were wild times. So I have Landwehr to win, mostly because his grappling is very, very solid. And he beat Darren Elkins. And that's Derrick Elkins is a good fighter. Like that was a good fight, and that's a gritty win over a gritty vet, and I really, really like that. But Erosa, what he does have going for him is his leg kicks are phenomenal, and if 2021 is anything, it is the year of the leg kicks. And I'm just hoping it's not another, chop down the tree type fight, and it might be. But my pick is Landwehr. Jacob, I'm going to skip right over you. You keep butchering these graphics, and it's really getting out of control.
John.
So, Dan, what's your pick here?
You can let Jacob go first. Well, we both always have the same picks anyways, because we're both, we're putting in that work.
Yeah, clearly Jacob's putting in a ton of work. John Erosa, what's your pick, Jacob?
Yeah, so I'll speak for Dan because I know we're on the same page here. Nate is gonna run through this dude. When I watch John, all I see is a Dominic Cruz without the head movement. His hands are low and he's like in your face, but Dominic Cruz is in and out. He's herky jerky. This dude just kind of just stands there. And when you Google John and in his highlights, it's all his highlights are just him getting beat up. Like he literally has a highlight tape on YouTube of him getting just tossed around. I don't know who made that, if it was a joke, and I feel bad for him. John, you gotta get a new editor or something. But Nick nailed it as well. Nate is a good old boy. He's from Tennessee, but he's got that like Bayou accent. There was an interview where they were asking about all the blood everywhere. He's like, man, I had the other guy's blood in my mouth, and I had my blood in my mouth. He's a wild dude. The best highlight I saw in tape of watching him was he got clipped in one of his fights, immediately thrown into a guillotine, didn't panic, gets out of the guillotine and looks at the guy at the same look I'm pretty sure he gave Nick. It was like a few for putting me in that guillotine, and started chasing him down the octagon like I'm going to beat the shit out of you for even doing that to me. So I have Nate in my lineup. He's going to maul this dude, and I think he does it very easily.
All right. Well, you're very confident, and Dan was wagging his finger like a lady at the supermarket. So what is your deal here? I'm guessing you're going with Julian Erosa?
Yeah, so I watched fights on both these guys. First of all, I will say all those stories make me like Landwehr even more. But just from watching his fight videos, it's like, this dude is awesome. He's yelling at Dana in the middle of the fight, doing the Ric Flair woos. He's just fun, and he's tough, and he is down for a brawl. So I wouldn't be surprised if Landwehr pulled this into a brawl and won or eked out a close one. But I think no matter how you slice and dice this one, it's going to be a slugfest. But I think Erosa is going to win this. I think he's gotten a lot better. I think he said it in one of his interviews. He's like, in his last fight, he beat what's his name?
Sean Woodson.
Woodson, yes, which is a tough stylistic matchup striking wise for anybody. He beat Woodson in a striking match, and he looked good. He's got like 50-something boxing matches, I think. So he is a good striker. And if this is a striker versus striker matchup and Landwehr doesn't shoot any takedowns, which I don't think he will, I think it's going to be a slugfest. But I think Erosa is just technically a better striker. And also I think we're underestimating his ability to slug it out too. I think he can hang in there, and he might not have all the cool stories and the, whatever those lines were about where he's from and all that. That's all fun, but I think Erosa's a better striker, and I think in a slugfest he could still even win that. So I'm going with Erosa, but I think no matter how you do it, it's going to be an awesome fight and a lot of points on both sides.
Yeah, I think Dan nailed it here when he said Erosa got better. To get better, you have to be not as good. Nate's always been good. He doesn't get better because he's always good.
He's always been good, and he's always been tough in brawls. But Erosa, that last fight was impressive, I will say. And I know he's, from some of the interviews I've listened to, he's like, I've just been waiting to show what I'm capable of in the gym. And some people have that problem. Like, there are guys that are killers in the gym, and for some reason, it takes a few fights for things to snap and they start showing what they're able to do. And I was impressed with his last fight. So we'll see. Either way, I think it's going to be a great fight.
Yeah, I think I picked Landwehr. I think the leg kicks are actually Erosa's path to success, but we'll see what happens. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Blaydes versus Lewis, we have the tried and true vet, Eddie Wineland versus John Castaneda. This is a good fight. I'm excited for this. I love Eddie Wineland. I've loved Eddie Wineland for what seems like the past 15 years. He's been around forever. His record shows that. So, Dan, I'm just going to jump right to you. What are your thoughts here? What you sticking with the vet, or they're both vets, but one is a real vet, or are you going with Castaneda here?
This is a tough one. This is a close one. I mean, I think the odds are probably about right. I'm going to, in a coin flip, go with Wineland. I think he is tough. He's got a lot of experience. He's a good striker. From what I saw on Castaneda, he got backed up a lot in a lot of his fights before the UFC. And Wineland, he's going to get in your face and throw some heat. So low level of confidence, but I'm taking Wineland for the upset pick here. And what I think could be a high-scoring DraftKings fight. So I don't have either of them in my lineup just because I'm going to go with a more confident value pick. But I'm going to go with Wineland for the upset.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that's a good pick. The styles are somewhat similar, except Eddie Wineland has all of that sort of tried and true veteran, knowledge to lean back on, where Castaneda strikes me more as a very, very good local guy that is sort of used to determine if you should get to the next level, if you should get to the UFC or not. That's just sort of my impression of him. He's talented, he's skilled, he's amassed a solid record, but if you look a little deeper, nothing he does is amazing. He's decent everywhere. And a lot of the people he's beaten are also just okay. Eddie's chin, to me, will be the biggest question here. So, Nick, what are your thoughts? Does Eddie Wineland still have some tools in his tool bag there, or is he starting to fade out?
He's only 36, actually. I'm just looking that up now because I thought he was older, but...
Yeah, I remember watching Eddie Wineland fight when he was WC champ back in the day. I was in college, so that was like 2005, I think, 2006. So he's been fighting for a very, very long time. For him to still be at the highest level, still doing that is like crazy impressive. And, he's lost some fights. He's gotten outworked a lot of fights. His volume sometimes isn't where it should be. He was a little gun shy against Dotson, but I think coming off that loss, and that was a pretty bad loss, he got knocked out really bad by Sean O'Malley. I think that will actually be very motivating for him, and I will pick him to win. Castaneda beat someone that I trained with before on the Contender Series, Shaden Leoha. I don't want to butcher it, but that kid was very good, and Castaneda beat him, and he beat Gustavo Lopez, who's in the UFC, who's also very good. So that's also there. I'm picking Wineland to win. I think he's got that sprawl and brawl style and the long technical striking. He can just outwork Castaneda, outbox him and win this fight. But, I don't know. Is he going to show up afraid to punch like he did against Dotson, like he did against Faber? Or is he going to show up and be that killer that comes out and throws lots of volume and has feints and is like moving around like a crazy man, but also getting it done. I don't know. There's too many variables. So I'm going to not touch it, but I wouldn't be against someone that did and took Wineland.
Yeah, again, I agree. I'm going Wineland. My pick is Wineland. I think the only real question mark is his chin, in my opinion, because I think he's more talented everywhere. He definitely has more experience everywhere. So I think all in all, he's the better fighter across the board. The question is, did age catch up to him, and is his chin gone or not? And it may be. He's been in some wars, and he's been doing it for a very long time, and your chin is the first thing that goes. So that's my pick. Jacob, what are your thoughts here? We actually have 3 Winelands. Are you going to split that up, or are we unanimous here?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That last kind of thing you were talking about there, that was a brutal KO to Shana O'Malley. He was out cold. And you've told me before, and you just mentioned it, that's the first thing to go. And sometimes when you lose that, you do not get that back. And he's the type of fighter that needs a chin. I mean, he gets in there and he's a pressure fighter. So if he's getting clipped now and getting dropped against, John, who's a great boxer, I think he's a more technical boxer than Wineland. I think it's going to be an issue. I think he will pressure. I don't think he's going to be scared that he was knocked out. I don't think he's that type of guy, but I just think his chin isn't going to stand up. John hasn't been finished since 2014, I believe. So he's always hanging in there, and his nickname is the Sexy Mexi. So I got to go with John in this fight. I don't think Wineland's chin holds up, and I think John's a more technical fighter. Overall, he's got, I think, 6 TKOs and 6 submission wins, so he can win anywhere, and I pick him to win. Not in my lineup, though. He's not going to be in my lineup.
Yeah, another tricky fight. I mean, the matchmakers here have done a solid job putting together entertaining fights, regardless of sort of name and stature. All these fights have been pretty close and pretty entertaining. Don't look at the odds. These odds are actually correct, but the other ones have been way off. So this will be a fun one.
The only reason why Jacob never decided to fight was because he wanted the nickname, the Sexy Mexi, and it was already taken. So
trademark.
It's trademarked. He decided to sit it out. So there we go.
I was in.
So he went to the second toughest sport, golf.
Next up at UFC Fight Night, Blaydes versus Lewis. We have Drakkar Klose versus Luis Pena, whose nickname is Violent Bob Ross, and that's exactly what he looks like, or pedophile Bob Ross, something in that category. The odds are crazy again. This one is, I think the odds are correct in that Drakkar Klose is the favorite. I don't think he's a 2-1 favorite, but Dan, prove me wrong here. What are your thoughts? Do you think he's a 2-1 favorite, or do you think this is completely flipped?
First of all, I'm not going to touch this fight for DraftKings. I'm rooting for Pena. I hope he wins. I think it's a tough matchup for him stylistically, but I know he's a good fighter. Yeah, I think 2-1 is probably a little bit extreme, but Klose is a very, very, very good striker. Pena's got experience and tough fights against high-level competition as well, but from what I saw and what I know about both these guys, I'm just not going to touch it for DraftKings.
Yeah, I mean, and to add, Pena took this fight on 10 days notice, so it's already short notice. He'd probably be a slight underdog even without the short notice. You add the short notice, it exacerbates it. I think that's what the odds makers are going with here. But Nick, I don't know your thoughts on this fight, and if you think the short notice is a factor or not.
It is a factor. It's always a factor. I mean, I'm sure Pena's training all the time, but it's just like a mental thing. Drakkar Klose has been getting ready for quite some time. Drakkar Klose is a tank. He almost knocked out Beneil Dariush. You look at his record, he did get knocked out, but he rocked him. It was a crazy fight. Christos Giagos, he beat Bobby Green. He beat Lando Venata, great striker. Mark Jacassi, great striker, Devin Powell, great grappler. He beat all these guys. He's a tank of a man. He's going to come forward. He's going to rough up Pena. He's going to beat him up. Pena's good and long, but Drakkar Klose will walk him down, get inside, rough him up. Pena's lost to lesser fighters than Drakkar Klose, and it's going to happen again. I am putting Klose in my lineup, and I'm very, very confident that he's worth the $9,000.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you think these odds are pretty much rock solid. So I think I agree with most of that. I think the X factor here is Pena. Obviously, he took it on short notice, but it's more he's a tricky fighter. He's not very orthodox in anything he does. His submissions are just tricky. Tricky is the best way to put it. So can he sort of catch Close in a trap? And Close has had some cardio issues in the past. So, can he catch him, or did this short notice fight just sort of equalize the cardio gap there? So Jacob, what are you, you're nodding, you're shaking your head. I seem to think you're leaning Pena.
Absolutely right, Angelo. The first thing you've gotten right all night. It is Luis Pena that's going to win this fight. He's just too long for this guy. And he fought Dariush. He lost Dariush. Dariush had his back the entire first round, was just riding him. I'm interested to see how Close is on his back, because I think at one point in this fight, he's going to end up on his back. He hasn't finished a fight in 5 years, so Pena's going to be there. He's a patient fighter, and he's just so long. He's so good on the ground. He's such a good grappler, and I just don't think that, if Dariush is also a good grappler and just rode his back the whole time, and he survived the Dariush submission attempts. But Pena, I just feel like it's going to be able to get it on the ground, and then that's kind of Pena's world. So I think everyone knew before they watched this video that I'm going to pick the violent Bob Ross. You stuck everyone. Now all of a sudden you're mentioning nicknames instead of me. It's very interesting. But I'm taking Luis Pena in this fight, and I'm putting him in my lineup.
Yeah, I mean, well, $7,200 is a solid value pick. Even if you don't think he can,
the other guy's not a finisher. He hasn't finished a fight in 5 years. So if you give Pena time, I always say, if you give grapplers and submission people time, that's all they need. Just here, one more submission attempt, Pena's going to win.
Came very close to finishing Dariush that last fight.
I know.
That was a crazy fight, but yeah.
Well, either way, he's always a ton of fun. So no matter what, it'll be fun to watch. I think it's closer than the odds. Nick thinks these odds are pretty spot on. Dan thinks it's close like I do. And then Jacob's going to go ahead and go underdog. So we're a little bit split here, but it's going to be an entertaining fight no matter how you look at it. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Blaydes versus Lewis. We have Jordan Gordon versus Danny Chavez. This is another interesting matchup. The craziest part about this matchup are the odds have completely flipped. It's Jordan Chavez. It's Jordan.
It's Jared. It's Jared Gordon.
Jacob.
Oh my Lord, Jacob. This is like you had one job.
It's a real name. It's not even a name of someone.
Dude, what's funny is
what do you do for work? I hope it doesn't involve anything to do with typing or spelling.
What's funny is I'm sitting here. I was trying to pull up his stats, and I typed in Jordan. And I'm like, nothing's coming up. I'm like, what's going on here? Nothing's coming up.
I mean, that's something you probably shouldn't admit on the air either, because
I'm going to redo this intro because this one's bad.
Do not.
Leave all this.
Leave it.
I'll go. Spelled it wrong and then acknowledge that he searched for it, couldn't find it, and still left it spelled wrong.
All right. Well, let me finish my thought. So
it would have been better just saying it was a typo. Gee.
Don't edit it. I'll be mad.
So let me finish my thought here. So first of all, we're very good at picking fights. One of us is horrific at doing graphics and typing. Where I was going with my intro there was these odds have completely flipped. So Jared opened as a giant favorite, and now it's flipped and he's the underdog. So these odds have done a wild shift here. It's an interesting matchup for sure. My pick, I'll hold off for a minute. We'll go to Jacob first, and he can talk about his image editing and then make a pick for us.
All I'm saying is 10 months from now, there's going to be a boom of babies named Jordan. That's an incredible name. I love that name, Jordan. There's going to be every baby in America is going to be Jordan next year. But when I look at Jordan, I didn't see anything special. He's kind of a brawler, and he's got good takedowns. Chavez, he had a short notice win, I think, in his maybe his UFC debut, or his last fight. And his post-fight interview, his face was flawless. I mean, flawless. He looked like he didn't get hit once, and it was supposed to be a war. The biggest difference here is, and this is very important, guys, I need everyone to pay attention. Jared Gordon was in a street fight and didn't look spectacular. He kind of grabbed the guy. When I want a UFC fighter in a street fight, I just want a 1-2 KO finish. That's what that Polyana did last week. 1-2, get done with it. Danny Chavez, and this is very important, guys, has KO tattooed on both of his fingers right here. KO right here and KO right here. He wins the fight.
Well, for your insight is as solid as your image editing skills. So, Dan, I'll throw it to you. What are your thoughts here? Do you agree with the original odds where Gordon was the giant favorite, or do you agree with these odds where Chavez is the favorite? Oh my God.
Oh, I was trying to find the mute button. This is a tough one. I think I would say Chavez, but for $8,400, I'm not that confident in it. I think it's a tough one to call. I'd say, honestly, I'm not going to put either of them in my lineup, I don't think, at this point. But for $7,800, Jardin Gordon might be a good value play. So I'm not going to touch this one for DraftKings. But, yeah, I don't think any kids are going to be named Jardin next year.
Well, and what I do want to note here is the training camp. So he trains out of MMA Masters. MMA Masters is another gym in Florida, sort of, the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area. They stole, so they have Kobe Covington now, and they have a few of those other, Florida American top team defector kind of fighters. And so that's turned into quite the little gym. And now they have some really solid training partners there. Some excellent fighters have come out of there in the past. And then now they sort of have this resurgence when they scooped up Kobe. So, there's some solid training going on down there, and there's some solid partners. So, Nick, what's your pick here? What do you think of all this?
Well, MMA Masters had Luis Palomino for a long time. It was very nasty. Amanda Nunes was there for years and years and years. So they've always been a top camp. Yeah. And then they have Baez, who's nasty, who's been killing it. Now knocked out Mike Brown, choked out Sato. Very good. So they're a great camp. I was leaning towards Gordon, but then I found out that Chavez had KO tattooed on his fingers, and now I'm starting to think twice about it. So for real though, if you really look at it, Jared Gordon, you look at his fights. He started off at 45. He beat Bill Algeo, who's nasty. If you've seen Bill Algeo fight, you know that he's really good on the local scene. And then he beat Michael Quinones, who's very good. Hakran Diaz, nasty. And then he was at 55. He lost a couple fights. He lost to Charles Oliveira. Can you even count that? Diego Fajeda, also nasty. And then he got knocked out by Joaquin Silva, but he was literally winning that whole fight. I remember watching the fight, and I'm like, oh, he's winning. This is very cool. And then he got knocked out. Beat Dan Moret, beat Chris Fishgold. I know people that train with Jared Gordon, and they say he's got very good boxing, very good takedowns, very solid all-around fighter for someone that's not a crazy athlete, good ground and pound. I'm going with Gordon. I'm trying to figure out a way to put him in my lineup, but I don't have him in my lineup yet. If I can move some things around, some of these fights, the odds come in a little later. I'll put him in. I'm trying to figure out how.
I'm not going to lie, Nick. I think you might have just put me over the edge of putting Gordon in my lineup. I was thinking he was a good value at 7,800, and you started running through those fights from the past. I'm like, you know what? 7,800 isn't that bad for him, but yeah, I'm with you. I don't have him in there right now just because I can't fit him in.
Put him in there, Dan. Do it.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Nick here. I think Jared Gordon's the pick. I think he's had the higher level experience. I think he's fought the better competition, and I'm just going to go with him. I think he has solid low kicks, very good kickboxer as well. I think he's the pick here, but it's tricky and it's close. And watching the odds shift the way they did was interesting and makes you think. But I definitely think he's my pick for sure. He's not in my lineup. That's a lot of money. I try to get some giant favorites and then work in super live underdogs. I don't think he's a super live underdog, but I do think he wins this fight. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Blaydes versus Lewis, we have Andrei Arlovski versus Tom Aspinall. Andrei Arlovski, former UFC heavyweight champion. He has been around for 100 years, and he has found some success later in his career. I think he's 43 years old, and he's doing well. He's riding himself a nice little win streak, and he's doing really, really well. I don't think this is a great matchup for him. I don't think it goes very well for him. I'll be rooting for him. I just don't think this is going to be his night. But Nick, I'll let you give your official thoughts on this.
Aspinall has been knocking people out, but the people that he's beating are not the same level of competition that Andrei Arlovski has fought. So if you look at Arlovski right now, it is crazy. 30-19 is a wild record, but you consider he's been fighting literally the best guys in the world since before I even knew. He was like UFC champ before I even knew what fighting was, and I've been training for 16 years. You know, like I've been training. And he's still doing it. That's so crazy. That's so wild. So for me, he was supposed to get knocked out his last fight versus Tanner Boser. He outclassed him boxing. Felipe Lins, you come $1 million winner of the PFL, beats him, kills him. Not even close. Rosenstruck, he gets knocked out pretty quick, but we're talking about Rosenstruck here. He's crazy guy, world-class kickboxer. Sakai, split decision, beats Ben Rothwell. Walt Harris, split decision, loses. I didn't watch the Shamil fight yet. I'll be honest with you. Haven't seen it. Not going to comment. Tuivasa, I thought he won that fight. He lost the decision. Beats Stephen Struve, beats Junior Albani. He has been good lately. Look at his cost. He's $7,000. You're crazy. I'm putting him in my lineup.
$7,000 is the one thing that really made me think about, do I throw Andrei Arlovski in my lineup? He's $7,000 and he's Andrei Arlovski.
You can compare Rosenstruck and all these guys that are hot in the UFC versus Alan Badat and Jake Collier. Jake Collier is a middleweight that he beat in the UFC that fights at heavyweight now. And Alan Badat is like unproven. He's a new guy and he's running through him. But I just think at $7,000 it's worth the risk to take Arlovski and then go with some heavy favorites.
So and to be clear, you think Andrei Arlovski is a great DraftKings pick?
I think he's gonna win.
Oh, okay, that's where I was going. So you also think he'll win?
Yes.
Okay.
Do I think he'll score a lot of points? No, because sometimes he kind of stares at people, and then other times he goes crazy. At his value, with the other people that I guarantee that I want, that I know are going to score me a lot of points, he'll get me my winning points. He'll score me a thing. I don't think he's a big point guy, but I do think that he wins this fight. I do think there's a possibility they stare at each other a lot this whole fight, but I'm going with him.
Yeah, I went the exact opposite direction. So if Andrei Arlovski wins, I'm going to be very excited. I've been watching that guy forever. He's been doing it forever, and he's unbelievable. But Tom Aspinall, he's a BJJ black belt, and he boxes with Tyson Fury. So he's boxing every day with one of the greatest boxers on the planet. So I just think he's younger. I don't know if he's the better boxer. He's definitely training with better boxers, but Andrei Arlovski's been doing it forever. But he's just, I think they're just on different trajectories. I think Andrei Arlovski's having a nice resurgence, but I think it's just more of, he's doing well later in his career more than he's about to hit a title run. But we'll see what happens. But I think Tom Aspinall's, I think these odds are correct, honestly. And I think Tom Aspinall's a favorite and should be the favorite. But Dan, I'll go to you. Andrei's been an American top team staple. You're an American top team guy. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so this is a tough one, right? It's the young up-and-coming guy who's got a bunch of, first-round finishes versus Arlovski, who's, older in his career, but as Nick said, still hanging tough with good fighters and winning fights. So it's one of those things where I could see it going one of two ways. Unfortunately, I could see it where Aspinall gets a knockout early. I think if that comes, it'll come in the first round. But without having seen much of him past the first round, and Arlovski being a crafty veteran, and if he lulls him into that sort of fight, I could see Arlovski doing what Nick said, a lot of staring, point fighting, and just eking out a decision. So I'm probably not going to touch this one. I think there's a lot of upside to Aspinall for the early knockout. But if that doesn't happen, I wouldn't be surprised, especially with the way Arlovski's done things lately with some of the fights he's won, if Arlovski was competitive in this one. So not going to touch it for DraftKings, but yeah, if I got to pick, I unfortunately got to say I got to go with the younger guy. I hope Arlovski wins. I'm rooting for him, but it's tough to bet against a younger guy on a win streak like that who's boxing with Tyson Fury.
Yeah, and I think both you and Nick did touch on it before I hand it over, Jacob. Both you and Nick touched on it. This is why being a veteran is a factor in these picks, because Andrei Arlovski is not stupid, and he could fully recognize I'm not as fast. I don't have the same power. My chin's not what it used to be. So I'm not going to stand here and fight the way that I fought in 2005. I'm going to turn this into hold you against the cage, work you down if I can, but at least ride out a decision that way. And that is a very real possibility. This could be fireworks, or this could be Andrei Arlovski being a crafty veteran, sort of using those let me win the round techniques. But Jacob, you're nodding your head all over the place again. What are your thoughts? Are you going with the young guy?
Yeah, so the UFC they didn't know what they were doing in the Shana Dobson fight. They know what they're doing here. Tom is the real deal. All I have in my notes is he's the real deal. This fight was set up for him. At $9,200, you look at his finishes. He's 15 seconds, 49 seconds, 9 seconds, a minute 5, a minute 16, a minute 21, 56 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute 35 seconds. All first round finishes. Yeah, I'll take that guy, and he's going to be in my lineup. We've had some duds lately with some big favorites. I don't think Tom's going to be the dud. I think he gets it done easy. He's an incredible boxer, like you said. He's in my lineup.
Yeah, and if everybody remembers that does DraftKings added that under 1 minute finish bonus. I think it's an extra 25 points if your fighter wins in under 1 minute. This is probably the livest fight on the card for that. So he's in my lineup. Sounds like he's in Jacob's. He's not in Nick's, but I get it because Andrei Arlovski's almost free at this point. But we'll see what happens with this fight. It'll be exciting. But I'm going with the heavy favorite.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys both just said. Like that, there's a strong likelihood he could get that first round knockout. I wish in one of his past fights, again, it's not his fault that he knocks everyone out in the first round. I just wanted to see something of him in the later rounds, and because I hate going into a fight, picking a fight for any reason that banking on the first round knockout. Now he could be great in the second and third. I just haven't seen it. And I just tend to cardio is such a big factor. And without having seen it, guy may be great in the second and third, but I haven't seen it. So if he doesn't get that first round knockout, I think Arlovski's veteran enough and crafty enough, like you said, to make it a different fight. So yeah, I'm going to stay away from this one, I think, although I'm tempted to put Aspinall in there for the points.
No, you're getting lured in by the possibility.
I know. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it, but
yeah, it'll be interesting either way. It'll be a fun fight for sure. I am doing it. I think the odds are right, so we'll see.
He's a make or break type pick. He's got to get that big number to make it worth the 9,200.
Yep. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Blaydes versus Lewis, we have Philip Hawes versus Nazarene Imavov. This is a rebooked fight. They were supposed to fight, I think it was a month ago, 2 months ago, and Philip Hawes pulled out. We don't know why. It wasn't a COVID issue. The fight dropped. Something happened with Philip. There was an injury or something to that effect, and they didn't say what it was, so I don't know what it is. Either way, this fight has been rebooked. I believe these odds are closer than they were for the original matchup, and I disagree. I think Philip should win. Never know in these type of, he's a wrestler with a ton of power, and sometimes that works against you where you love your hands all of a sudden, like what's happened to Tyron Woodley the last few years. But we'll see what happens. But before I do my official pick here, I'm going to go to you, Nick. Nick, do you think the national champion wrestler in Philip Hawes gets this done, or are you going with Imavov?
Yeah, I think that Hawes gets it done. I think that he hits like a truck. He's been knocking everyone out. He's had kind of a turn the corner with his skill, and he can wrestle at such a high level. I'm favoring him to win. If you look at Imavov, his last fight, he kind of dragged his opponent through the mud and really gave him a tough fight and was kind of all over him. I just don't think he'll be able to do that with Hawes. I don't have him in my lineup. I am picking him to win. If I maneuver some things, I might put him in my lineup. I don't think he's a bad person to have in your lineup.
Yeah, so I do have Philip Hawes in my lineup. I think $8,200 is a nice price point for somebody that I think I'm going to score a ton of points either way. I think he's either going to knock this dude out, ton of points, or go back to his wrestling base and just take him down, score those 5 takedown points, and then either get all of the ride time points, the control points, or he'll get up and he'll take him down again. So I think the odds are wrong because I think Philip Hawes should be a bigger favorite as he was a few months ago. Maybe the question mark here is the injury. We don't know what the issue was. I don't think anybody does. But I'm going Philip Hawes. I do have a 3 degrees of separation personal connection here. My buddy's related to him, and he's only said amazing things about him and his work ethic and his training as of recent. So I'm going Philip Hawes here. But Jacob, you shook your head again. You're very animated in your reactions. What are your thoughts here? Going with Imavov?
No, so I'm kind of upset now because now me and your picks are starting to align, and I don't think that's good for either one of us because I have Phil Hawes in my lineup. He is the real deal. This guy is tough. Even in his Contender Series loss, he was dominating that fight. The funny thing about Imavov is originally I thought he was Russian because the French flag and the Russian flag, very similar, very similar. So I thought he was Russian. I knew Philip Hawes was going to be a wrestler. I thought this was going to be an incredible fight. Wrestler, the Russian, the American. And then I found out he was French. And so things got changed a little bit. He is 6'3". He's got some range. I think he's very good when he can control the pace. I think he needs to get Philip Hawes respect early if he's going to have a chance in this fight. But other than that, I think Philip Hawes just comes out aggressive. If he's a wrestler, so if you got to go for those wrestlers when you get the opportunity in DraftKings, because those 5 points will add up and add up. And I think being the bigger guy, 6'3", I think he might be able to get up from those takedowns, which just means more points for Philip Hawes in DraftKings. So if he doesn't get the respect early, I think Philip Hawes runs through them, and Philip Hawes wins the fight, and I have him in my lineup.
Yeah, I just hope he continues the streak. I mean, the concern sometimes is those wrestlers that find success with striking fall in love with it and lean on it too much, and then it goes the wrong direction at some point. But Dan, I'll let you give your pick here and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so I think right now I'm going to put Hawes in my lineup for $8,200. I think he's worth it. I think he's got the upside of definitely a first round finish.
I feel better now.
He's got. I'm looking at his record. It's one of those things where he's got so many first and second round finishes. I almost wish I got to see more of him in the third round, because I think this is a tough fight. And Imavov could take him into deep waters. But to your point, if Hawes has the wrestling and the cardio to, let's say, things get a little scrappy in the second and third round, if he's got the muscle memory and the cardio to rely on that wrestling in those later rounds, I think he'll start off strong. And then even if it gets a little ugly, he can win decision. But I think there's a lot of upside for him for a first round finish. So I'm going to put Hawes in for the $8,200. And I think he'll win the fight. And if not, it'll be a very close fight and hopefully a lot of points.
Well, and especially if we're talking DraftKings, it's a $200 difference. And there's way more than $200 in DraftKings difference in their athletic ability, in their credentials, in their training. There's a big gap as far as who they are as fighters, but DraftKings, it's a very narrow gap. So I don't see why anybody would put Imavov in their DraftKings lineup. I just think the price is too close and there's not much upside there. So we're all going Hawes here. most of us have him in our lineups, and we'll see how that plays out. I'm hoping, I'm hoping for an early finish. We mentioned it in the last fight, but I'm hoping for it here too.
I will say my only concern is for Imavov. If it does get into that second, third round, again, not having seen Hawes in those rounds, like I think the only chance for Imavov to win is to take over in those later rounds. So
Dan, you nailed that cardio pick one time, and now every single fight you're saying,
just
I'm worried about cardio.
I know nothing about Hawes cardio,
but
listen, take a look at people's body types. When you are that muscular and that explosive and that athletic,
you're not going to get your own video every week.
It doesn't translate to later rounds.
I agree. But you're not going to get your own video every week by saying it for every single
fight.
I
got
Hawes one guy gasses out.
So you can play whatever video you want, but I got Hawes in my lineup, so I didn't avoid the pick like I did, tried to tell you guys all to do last week.
Oh, here we go. Next fight.
How'd that work out for you, Jacob?
Next fight.
Next up at UFC Fight Night, Blaydes versus Lewis. We have Aleksei Oleinik versus Chris Dukakis. Or Dukas.
And I nailed those names.
This is unbelievable, the names. You just called him Dukakis.
Because Dukakis, I am going to edit out. I don't get to look stupid in these videos.
No, of course not.
Dukakis is, isn't he the old?
Is it Dukakis? It's Daukus.
Daukus.
Yeah,
no, you're right.
Dukakis
is the old mayor of New York. That's why that's like.
Oh, that's why you said it. Okay.
Yeah.
Just leave it in. Leave it in.
I'm not leaving that.
Next
up at UFC Fight Night, we have Aleksei Oleinik versus Chris Daukus.
And I nailed that. Oleinik. Of all the names I've gotten wrong, you would think I would get this one wrong, and I got that one right. Go ahead.
You actually said his first name was Alexis, so you spelled.
The spelling is right. The spelling is right. I'm worried about the spelling.
Alexis Oleinik versus Chris Dukakis for Angelo.
We're going to get the picks correct. We are not going to get the names correct. That's just how this goes. Anyway, this is another interesting fight. These odds are actually pretty close to accurate. My question mark here, though, is Chris Daukus fought one of our very good friends, Parker Porter. We all know him personally. Good guy, good friend. He won that fight, but Parker took that fight on incredibly short notice. He just had a baby. And he wasn't in a camp and then took the fight because he got the opportunity. He took it to get the opportunity, but he wasn't necessarily ready to go, right? You can't say no to that opportunity, and he didn't. And Parker looked good in that fight. Ultimately, he gassed and it went the other way, but he looked good in that fight. That's what worries me here. So I think Chris Daukus is the pick and should win, and he's been winning and has looked great. But if I'm using our good friend as the bar here, Parker looked great in that fight. And if he had a full camp and had great cardio, it might have been a different situation. And that worries me a little bit against such a veteran in Oleinik. This guy's he's like an Arlovski, but a little younger and a little more one-dimensional, but he's very effective. So Nick, I'll go with you. You know Parker very well. I don't know if you think that barometer that I used made any sense, but what are your thoughts here?
No, Parker's my buddy. I trained with him. He was in the middle of switching a camp and doing all this stuff and then opening up his own spot and had a baby, yada, yada, yada. But he took the fight. You take the fight, you take the fight. And it was a good back and forth. But Daukus's boxing, once he got comfortable, looked really, really clean. His last fight, his boxing looked super clean. He knocked the guy out in like 49 seconds, an 8-0 undefeated fighter. He's lost in the past. I believe he is a different fighter now. Aleksei Oleinik is crazy. He's beaten Travis Brown. He wins with like these crazy submissions. He just beat Fabricio Verdum. But when he beat Fabricio Verdum, he was going wild and throwing all these hooks. And Verdum looked out of it. He was just kind of shelling up and not really fighting. So that was like an odd win. And obviously, he's very good. He's very tricky. He's got good jiu-jitsu. But Daukus, I think, is a good wrestler. I believe he wrestled before. He's got a good, solid base. And his hands are just so crisp. I think he's going to catch Oleinik. I think he's going to knock him out. But he's been taken down. He's been submitted before. So I'm not confident enough in this, but if some things move around, I might add Dawkins to my lineup. But right now he's not in it.
Yeah, so Dawkins is in my lineup. I think the story of this fight personally is either KO, Dawkins wins, or submission, Oleinik wins. If Oleinik can march forward, take him down, you'll probably submit him or can, where Dawkins, has the much better striking, and I think we'll get it done that way. But Dan, I'll let you make your pick here. Do you agree with that?
Here's what I'll say on this one. So I've trained with Oleinik a few times. He's down at ATT. Awesome dude. Guy's got freaking 75 fights. I mean, he's fought everybody, and he's beaten a lot of really good guys. Dawkins, his boxing has looked really good, but I just don't think he's fought. I mean, he definitely has not fought the same level of competition as Oleinik. He's looked great in a lot of his recent fights. His last fight was the most impressive win, but it was a first round quick knockout, which isn't always telling of, this is the fight game. You can land a shot early, and it's not always telling of who the better fighter is. Not saying he wasn't, but I'm just saying we didn't learn much in that last fight, I don't think. The Parker Porter fight, like you said, Porter took it short notice. Prior to that, it was a lot of regional stuff. So I don't think Dawkins has truly been tested yet. He's looked good in those scenarios, whereas Oleinik, on the other hand, has fought everybody and fought tough guys recently. And even at, I think he's 43 years old, he finds a way to make fights, even the ones he loses. Derrick Lewis, he had him in trouble at one point. He had him in real trouble in that first round. So I'm going with Oleinik. I'm probably not going to put him in my DraftKings lineup, but I'm going with him. I don't think it'll be a clean double leg or something like that, but he figures out ways, scrambles somehow to either get to the back or get on the ground. And he's got a lot of tricky submissions. And if Dawkins can't make this a pure boxing match, I think Oleinik could figure out a way to pull off a win here with the experience and with his ground game. And I haven't seen much of Dawkins on the ground. He's got so many first round finishes. I haven't really seen much of his grappling. So I'm going to take Oleinik for the upset here, but I'm not putting either in my DraftKings lineup.
Yeah, I mean, we have the whole fight card is very interesting, but this is the third or fourth fight where we have an older vet versus a younger surging up and comer, and we'll see if that veteran crafty can get it done. So Jacob, I'll let you make your pick here. You going with the vet, or you going with sort of the young knockout power guy?
Yeah, Dan is back on track. It's good. Finally, Dan, you're back on track. Oleinik gets a job done. He walks through Dawkins, gets him on the ground, and submits him. He wins. He's in my lineup. It's as easy as that. All
right. So short and sweet. We're split here. 2 versus Dawkins, 2 for Oleinik. So we'll see how this fight breaks down. It'll be another fun one to watch. Next up at UFC Fight Night, Blaydes versus Lewis. We have Charles Rosa versus Derek Minor, however you want to pronounce that. This is another close one. I don't agree with these odds, and we've been saying that all night long. We've actually been saying that for the last few weeks. But this will be an exciting fight. I'll tell you right now, I have Derek in my lineup. I think not only does he spell Derek with an A instead of an E, I think he's just going to get it done. I think he's got a lot going for him. I'll get into my official breakdown in a minute. But Jacob, I'll let you pick. Do you agree with the odds, or are we picking another underdog here?
Ooh, this is a 50-50 fight. Both these boys are grapplers. And I mean, they're very good grapplers. I think Minor's got 22 of his 25 wins or submission wins. The other guy seems like a pure jiu-jitsu guy. Neither of them seem very comfortable in the stand-up game. I will say that Charles Rosa was dominated by Bryce Mitchell in wrestling. Bryce Mitchell is also a fantastic jiu-jitsu guy, but he was kind of mauled in the wrestling game. And I think that Derek is a better wrestler than Rosa. The thing that worries me is there was a fight with Minor that I saw that he was gassed in the first round. And when he was gassed, it looked like he just kind of gave up. I think he ended up getting submitted himself that fight. So there's gas tank issues. If I might be mistaken, but I think he's actually coming down a class in weight. So if you already have gas tank issues and you're cutting that much more weight, I don't know. I actually do have Derek Minner in this fight just because I think his wrestling is better. So I think he can control the fight better. Anytime you get two jiu-jitsu guys together, the better wrestler is going to win, I think, in my opinion. They're just going to get in better positions. The gas tank issue worries me, to take it from Dan. You got to worry about the gas tank. But I think Derek gets it done.
Don't be upset. We'll start playing your clips last week of your lock of the week pick? Or whatever. Yeah,
where I nail it and she got the most points. Yeah, let's play that, Dan. I'd love that.
No, I'm not talking about that.
Okay.
Talking
about Dan. Who do you think wins this fight, Dan? Who do you think wins?
I think what it was is like, this one's negative 400. It should be negative 800. I can't believe that they have only a negative 400.
Dan, we're not doing a fight recap. Who do you think wins this featherweight fight?
I think Charles Rosa wins the fight. I think it is closer than what the odds suggest. So I've trained with Charles before, a good guy. He trained at American Top Team for a lot of years. Recently, though, I think he's no longer training at the main academy. I think he switched camps. There's another camp nearby. So I don't know a lot about them. I know a couple guys there. They're all good. But, having trained at ATT for a lot of years, they have the best sparring that you can find in the country, in my opinion. There's a select few other camps that have that level of sparring, but at any rate, so he's no longer there from what I know, training with all those guys. So that concerns me a little bit. I'll be rooting for Rosa. I think he'll win this fight. Back to the cardio. Jacob, you actually said it before you started actually knocking what you were saying, which was a couple fights I've seen of him. He was gassing in the first round, second round. So if he shows up out of shape, I think they're both able to get a finish in this fight on the ground. But Rosa's always trained. He's always in shape, regardless of what camp he's training at. So I think Rosa wins this fight. I'm not touching it for DraftKings. But yeah, I think Rosa will win. Minner goes for that guillotine like 100 times in a row. It seems like the last fight I watched him, he was pulling guillotine, I think 3 times in the first round. So that's one of those submissions that's like a little scary because you can get it at any point and end the fight. But I think Rosa should win this fight, and he outclasses him all over.
Yeah, I think I told you earlier, I have Minner in my lineup. I think the difference maker here is it is grappler versus grappler. And I think Minner's wrestling is better. And I think just that little edge in the wrestling, he can dictate when it's time to grapple or when he doesn't want to grapple. So that's the pick.
And I was going to say, typically when you get two unbelievable grapplers, they're both scared to grapple. And this might be the worst striking match we've ever seen, because I don't think either one of them are very good strikers, but they could be scared to grapple. But maybe Nick sees it coming a different way. What do you think, Nick?
I've trained with Charles before. I've been down at ATT, and I trained with Charles, and he's not much of a wrestler, to be honest with you. He is a friend, a personal friend. We're both East Coast guys, but I'm just going to be honest about this. That's my job, is to be honest about what's going on. But he is tricky. He does have a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Minner has been submitted before many times. So he has submission wins, but he's also been submitted a lot. Charles Rosa is sneaky with his submissions and can win from top. He can win from bottom. And his striking is nothing crazy, knockout power. He basically hits you and runs and does a karate style. When you get inside, he boxes. Not really a power striker, but if you look at his last fight, he beat Kevin Aguilar. If anyone followed Kevin Aguilar beat Rick Glenn, who's nasty, who was a WSOF champion. He knocked out Ton Lee. That was standing. He knocked out Ton Lee, who is the ONE MC champ at 145. And Rosa outstruck him that fight. He outworked him and he outstruck him that whole fight. So even though it's nothing flashy and nothing great, I think Rosa gets it done, and I put him in my lineup.
Boy, yeah. So that's now I'm questioning my pick, but my, like I said earlier, I think my difference maker was the wrestling. You sort of reaffirmed that Charles Rosa's great on jiu-jitsu, very sneaky, doesn't have the wrestling. So the wrestling may be in my opinion, the wrestling may be the differentiator here. So it will be interesting. You mentioned Derrick's been submitted before. He's almost like, you have a stand-up guy that it's like, I'm either going to kill or be killed. I'm either knocking you out or you're knocking me out. That's Darrick Minner, but for grappling. He either submits you or gets submitted. There's really not much in between on his record. So it'll definitely be interesting.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Sorry. He actually has fought at 135 before. So he is not big at 145. But I think that he's gone up to 55, down to 35, all over. You look at his record, he's a guy like anytime, any place, anyone, anywhere type fighter. I know Charles Rosa fought at 170 once because he wanted it was when he first getting started, and it was kind of like an easier win for him. But I don't count that. I think Minner has like bounced around, just fought anyone, anytime, any place type guy. But I think that Rosa's better.
Yeah, so I think maybe those Minner cardio issues were weight cut issues. And maybe this is a more natural weight class. I don't know what those fights were at, but he definitely had cardio issues in fight. But if they are more weight cut related and he's at 145 and feel more comfortable, that should make you feel a little bit better, Angelo.
Well, I honestly, I think they're very evenly matched on the ground. And if there's an edge, it's the wrestling. So I'm going with the wrestling edge. And so Minner's my pick. He is in my lineup. $7,400 is pretty cheap. And I think he has we talked earlier about Andrei Arlovski at 7,000. I think for 400 more, Minner makes more sense. He's lighter, so it's going to be a much busier fight, I would assume. And I think he'll win. So it'll be an interesting fight, a fun fight. But we'll see how this one goes. The co-main event for UFC Fight Night, Blaydes versus Lewis, is Ketlen Vieira versus Yana Kunitskaya. And I'm proud of myself. I nailed that one. I think this is the most lopsided fight on the entire card. We have $9,300 for DraftKings for Vieira and $6,900 for Kunitskaya. Anyway, it's again a closer fight than the odds say. I think it'll be a fun fight, honestly. I'm going to personally, I didn't touch Vieira. I know the assumption here is she's going to march forward, get her to the ground, submit her, and that's why she's so expensive. But let me push my pick off. I'll go right to you, Nick. What are your thoughts here on the co-main event?
I think Ketlen is physically a more superior physical specimen. Yana, obviously, everyone knows her because she was like the first person to step up and say, whatever, I'll fight Cyborg. So she went up to 45 and fought Cyborg. She's very tough, gritty, but not really a finisher, more like point fighter style. I think Vieira really impressed me her last fight when she fought Sergey Eubanks and outstruck her the whole time. And her other fights, she's been more of a grappler. I think that Yana has beat some pretty good people in the UFC and is tricky and crafty, but I'm going to favor Vieira, but I'm also not going to touch it at that cost. It just doesn't fit into my lineup with other people that I think will finish quicker.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's a ton of money, and I think she wins. I do think she wins, but to win, she realistically has to get this to the ground. I mean, she's got a ton of power, but she doesn't necessarily have the technique with the power. She just sort of wings punches. They're powerful punches. They're knockout power type punches, but she just throws them out there. She has very good grappling, and I think that's why the odds are the way that they are. She's going to, take down Yana and get that submission. But Dan, what are your thoughts on the co-main event here? Do you think this is as much of a mismatch as presented?
No, not necessarily. Stylistically, it's a weird one, I think. I mean, watching Vieira, she's beaten a lot of tough girls. Her only loss was a first-round knockout to Irene Aldana, who's very tough. She's got great jiu-jitsu. She's got power shots. She doesn't mind trading. She had a tough time taking Sarge Eubanks down the whole fight. Didn't seem like she really set up her shots that well. Didn't have much of an entry for like a double leg or anything like that. So she did get one takedown. It was a trip in the second round, I believe, but didn't do a whole lot on top. So, and the striking I thought was pretty close back and forth. I thought that fight was closer than the judges saw it. And then we got Kunitskaya, who's her last two fights. It's like her game plan was to clinch you and hold you against the cage. She did that against Stoliarenko in her last fight. And it's weird because normally you clinch someone against the cage with a plan to get a takedown. She did the clinch against the cage, but did not want a takedown, to the point where Stoliarenko was literally like pulling guard and trying to like wall walk down to get on the ground. So just stylistically, I think if Kunitskaya tries to play that game again, it could make it a boring, low-scoring fight. So I don't see a lot of value in either of them because I think Vieira is better and will win. But for $9,300, if Kunitskaya is going to try to clinch and do that type of game plan again, I could just see it being a low-pace, low-scoring fight. So I think Vieira wins. I think she's better. I think she's got heavier hands, better jiu-jitsu. But I am not touching this for DraftKings.
So Jacob, what's your pick here? We're all leaning towards Vieira as she's going to win this fight. She should win this fight, but at $9,300, that's a lot of money to spend. Did you put her in your lineup? Who do you think wins?
Yeah, so originally I had Vieira in my lineup, and then I started watching tape on her, and she just doesn't seem like she does enough to me to justify the $9,300. So I took her out of my lineup. I think she's definitely going to win, but I think it's closer than people think. But yeah, she's not in my lineup.
Yeah, so I think we're all on the same page. Everyone has Vieira to win. Nobody wants to spend the $9,300 to squeeze her into their DraftKings lineup because, yes, she'll win. We just don't know if it'll be, the 100+ points that you're looking for out of somebody at that price. And that's interesting. As we move into the main event, let's see what we do there. The main event of UFC Fight Night is Curtis Blaydes versus Derrick Lewis. We have the tried and true wrestle first, wrestle only Curtis Blaydes versus the Derrick Lewis. I will do whatever I need to do to win this fight. Jiu-jitsu isn't real. It doesn't exist. Interesting matchup, honestly. It isn't on paper because paper says Curtis Blaydes is going to take Derrick Lewis down, punch his teeth in, and win that fight. But history says Derrick Lewis will be flat on his back in round 3, just stand up out of nowhere and punch you in the face and you're unconscious. And Volkov knows that. So it's somewhat of an interesting matchup. Jacob, I'll go to you. We talked earlier, you mentioned the Ngannou loss and the comparison there. So why don't you go ahead and give us your thoughts?
Yeah, all it takes is one punch. I mean, when you're in this weight class, all it takes is one punch. But when it's Derrick Lewis, all it takes is one punch. And everyone knows the shots are coming, and it's going to take him one uppercut, just a fraction of an uppercut to put Blaydes down. Will that happen? I don't know. Originally, I based my lineup around Derrick Lewis, meaning I liked him to win the fight just to get it done the way Ngannou got it done. And then I started thinking about more and more, and you just can't, with all the points that are available to come to Blaydes with all the takedowns, because as you mentioned, Derrick Lewis a lot of times doesn't have great takedown defense. It's getting better, but sometimes he's just so strong that he just says, you know what, I think I'm just going to stand up, like you mentioned, and he'll just stand up. But Blaydes is going to take him down repeatedly. You can't pass up those points. I love Derrick Lewis. I hope he gets the big win. Originally, I had him in my lineup to get a bunch of big favorites, but I switched it around and I have Curtis Blaydes, and I think he wins the fight.
Yeah, so I have Curtis Blaydes in my lineup. I think he wins. Anytime you have the power of Derrick Lewis, there's the threat of that. But I just listen. His takedown defense has gotten much better. It genuinely has. It hasn't gotten that. It hasn't gotten Curtis Blaydes better. That's a big gap, right? Learning how to defend takedowns against an MMA fighter versus learning how to defend takedowns against a phenomenal wrestler who fights MMA. Nick, what are your thoughts here? Do you think what I'm going to reword that. What chance do you give Derrick Lewis to win this fight?
Okay, so I'll give you a little preface on this. Actually, when I was visiting ATT, Derrick Lewis was a roommate of mine. I lived with him for like a month that I was there. and very nice guy, very funny guy before he was popular. But it was right when he first got in the UFC. Ended up moving back to Texas, doing all his camps there. But before he got in the UFC, he fought Jared Rosholt, who was a PFL finalist, very good national champ wrestler. And Rosholt took him down, and he got up and knocked him out. And he made me watch the video of it and the interview where he said, I'm going to get up. He's going to take me down, but he's going to get tired. And eventually I'm just going to get up. You take Lewis down, he pops back up. You take him down, he pops back up. Iganov took him down. Latifi took him down. Oleinik took him down. Those are his last 3 fights. Cormier took him down, submitted him. He beat Ngannou in the most boring fight I've ever seen. But he won. And you look at that, Roy Nelson took him down. That was a while ago. So his takedown defense isn't as good as his ability to get back to his feet. So I don't really think his wrestling's improving. I think he's just getting better at getting up once he gets taken down. And he never quits. He has so much heart. He'll never give up. He's never truly out of a fight, because even going into the last 10 seconds, he will throw everything he has behind every shot, and he could win off of one punch. With that said, Curtis Blaydes is my meme buddy. We send each other memes all the time on Instagram. He's got some funny ones. Many of them I actually reshare that he sends me because they're pretty funny. I share them on my story. Blaydes is not as good of a wrestler as someone like Jared Rosholt, but what he does better is he's a better striker. If you look at his last fight versus Volkov, he was winning a lot of those striking exchanges and then taking him down. If you look at his fight versus Junior Dos Santos, who knocked out Derrick Lewis, he knocked out Junior Dos Santos standing. And obviously the threat of the takedown changes that a little bit, so that could have been something, but he still got it done. When he takes you down, you're not getting back up. If you do get back up, he's going to mock you, he's going to shoot on you again, and he's going to take you back down. I see a lot of points scored for Curtis Blaydes this fight. Takedown, Lewis works, gets up. Takedown, works, gets up. He might even set a DraftKings record for takedowns. I think he wins this fight. I'm putting Blaydes in my lineup. That's that.
Yeah, so 2 things. I didn't know you roomed with Derrick Lewis for a little while. So very
I like him. He's funny. I like him. I'm just being like real about what I think is going to happen in this fight. And also he called out Curtis Blaydes, so that might change something, but I'm going with Blaydes.
Well, and the other thing I wanted to point out before I give to you, Dan, for a pick is takedowns in DraftKings are worth 5 points. So you actually score more points if you take somebody down, they stand up, you take them down again. That's 10 points. And the person standing up, you got nothing for the stand up. So a fight like this where Derrick Lewis bounces right back up, if he can, that's a lot of points. The repeated takedowns is a lot of points to score. That's why he's definitely in my lineup. So Dan, what'd you do here?
Yeah, I got Blaydes in my lineup too. I think he's got crazy cardio, good wrestling, good ground and pound. He's an underrated striker too. With Lewis and his power, there's always that chance where he lands a big one early and kind of ruins the night. But man, the upside on Blaydes is huge in terms of points. And honestly, I think he can get a finish on this one. One thing I'll say about Lewis, because I was thinking about all his fights. I'm like, man, he gets taken down, but he always figures a way to scramble back up. And I was just looking at the guys that took him down, and most of them were undersized heavyweights. Even Rosholt, I think you mentioned earlier, Nick, he's probably 240-ish, right? Blaydes is 260 something, right? 260 and change, 6'4". He's a legit size heavyweight. So when he gets on top of you, it's different than when Aleksei Oleinik was on top of him last fight, who did get on top of Lewis. So if Aleksei Oleinik is getting on top of Lewis, I mean, Curtis Blaydes is going to get on top, and it's going to be a different scenario. I think he's going to land a lot of punches. I think he's going to keep him down. And I think, honestly, he might get the finish TKO in round 3, maybe round 4. But I'm putting Blaydes in my lineup.
Are you going to, is that a prop bet that you're going to touch?
I don't know. I'm going to look before I make my side bets. I'm going to look into it a little bit more, but yeah, I might take Blaydes by finish, depending what the odds are.
So 4 up, 4 down for us. We're all going Curtis Blaydes. I don't think anybody's going Derrick Lewis in their lineups. He is super cheap, but I don't think anybody sees sort of the volume that we'll need. If he does win, it will be by knockout, and there'll be a bunch of points there. But if he loses, he'll score like 10 points or something absurdly low because he'll be taken down over and over and over again. So it should be a fun fight. It'll be exciting. Every Derrick Lewis fight always is. So check out our DraftKings breakdown video, and then if there's any changes, we'll come back and we'll talk about any fights that might be added before fight night. Before you go, check out the description below. In there, we have links to our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, and more importantly, to our DraftKings League. Check out the league, join the league, participate in the contests, and as we get going and as you start winning, we're going to start handing out gift cards and participating and doing things like that. So check those out. Every week, there are drops on every fight card. So make sure you check out this channel and our social media on Saturday before the fights start so that you have our most updated lineups and picks.